I work at AET Group, Inc. I'm the Director of Operations. And our company is a broad-based environmental company. Part of what we do is building science. So in the area of building science, which I spend a lot of time, that's where the relation between existing buildings and flood risk come in. Well, related to construction, which in building homes or building commercial buildings, grading and removing the water off the site properly is part of it. I've been doing that for over 40 years. I can talk to our office. We looked at managing our groundwater, the surface water on our office. We put in a pre-bay, a bioswale, and a rain garden system that is managing over 80% of the water that comes onto our property. That's a very interesting question. The frequency, there's a lot of variables to take into consideration. Partly would be the construction of the building, whether the foundation is a rubble foundation, which means it's made out of stone, or whether it's a cinder block, or whether it's a poured concrete, and then whatever membranes have been put onto it. So a lot of these things are variables that are in place to determine whether or not that foundation wall can withstand seepage. The other is soil conditions and the type of soil. If it's a clay soil, very susceptible to retaining water around the foundation. If it's a sand or sand more than anything, you're going to get really good seepage and it'll dissipate. Penetrations through the wall as well are very primary, and cracks. These are things that in the walls, not only the walls but the floors. And the floor system is not connected to the walls but abuts to the wall. So there is a gap between the wall and the floor that also is a point of seepage if the hydrostatic pressure is great enough. Okay, the best one would be a poured foundation because it's a continuous. There's no breaks in the foundation itself. Poured foundations started as early as the 1940s, depending on some of the locations. They were done with simply putting boards on top of each other and pouring concrete between them. They became more popular as we got into the 50s and 60s, and they've been there ever since. There's been some modifications to them where they're putting steel in them, and they're doing now the insulated concrete form, which pours concrete between a form made out of insulation, which insulates a house. Well, some of the things I mentioned earlier, we look for penetration. If there's any visible penetration through the walls, we look for effervescence that shows a sign that that wall is wet and that water is seeping through it. And we look for cracks. We look for cracks in the floor system. We look for cracks in the wall system. And if there's any identification of moisture there. We also use a very simple tool called an audible moisture meter. And by placing that in areas of moisture, it will go off very loud as a siren if there is moisture present. So those things are what we use and some of the things that we look for. We look for that on the outside as well to see if there's any cracks in the wall itself. And if the weeping tiles are open where they meet the masonry and things like that. The greatest hurdle, understanding that there is a risk. A lot of people believe that I'm located in an area that is not flood prone. With the storms that we're having today, where the storm will stall and dump large volumes of water, and this was apparent just last week here in Toronto, they all of a sudden have the inability to have that water drain away, and they are susceptible to the flooding. So that's one of the things, is to understand that there's a risk, to know what they have in their house to control that risk, and to make sure they maintain it. Simple things like eave troughs, that they're clean and that they're functioning properly, that the grade works. Grade is a big thing, that you're keeping the water away from the property. So it's the understanding understanding of just their home and how it operates as a system and what they can do and the maintenance that they should constantly keep up to the equipment. Keeping the story alive, getting the message out. We're working with a municipality outside of the jurisdiction of Ontario, and they have been really instrumental in making sure that their homeowners are aware of the program. They put up billboards, they've put out flyers, they've put inserts in the utility bills, they've done radio interviews. They've really put a lot of effort into getting the message out, and with that repeated message, people start to understand that this is something that they should pay attention to. The municipality itself, that's at a homeowner's level. I think the responsibility of the municipality in terms of seepage, there isn't much of a responsibility or risk to them. Managing water well, that you can keep water away from the residential areas based on overland flooding, which even overland water, which if you have saturated soil will impact the seepage into the home. But from what they can do, more the homeowner, what they can do to mitigate that rather than the municipality. The very simple answer is no. Even myself, even being in the industry, there are things that I wasn't prepared for. We have an office building that is old. It was built in 1880. It sits on an active spring, and we have a lot of pumps running at a lot of times. So, just being aware, we have alarm systems on that, and homeowners becoming aware of the equipment, what it does, what is a sump pump, why do I have one? They're not even aware of some of the very basic things that they have. They've covered over their sewer cleanouts, they've covered over their floor drains. So it's understanding your home. There's a lot of resources that have been made available through the Intact Center that homeowners can definitely have access to, and it helps make them aware. The assessment that has been developed and that is being done for homeowners, it paints a plan. It gives them a plan of action, a variety of things that they can do and things that they should consider, and it prioritizes them. It isn't a must-do, should-do list. It is a plan of action that says, here are some of the things you should consider doing to either maintain the equipment you have or to improve the resilience of your house, and they get to choose. Make sure that everything that they have in there that is designed to keep the water away is being looked after, starting first with keeping water away from the building. That would be grading. That would be proper eave troughing and downspouting. That would be if water gets to the building, then we want to make sure that we can mitigate the entry of that water into the building itself. So just maintenance is the biggest thing. Really, it's surprising that they are not aware of what little maintenance they need to do. Checking little things like caulking. If there's penetrations that are through the wall, make sure that they're sealed off. Making sure that your windows are caulked. It's a point of access. Window wells, that they're cleaned out. Simple things. It's not very huge things that they need to do. In some cases it is. This morning I had a client that is going to be looking at some foundation repair going down the road, but usually it isn't that great. It might be a window well. It's very simple things. It might be improving the grading around their house. So knowing that I'm directing water away from my building, and that if the water gets to my building, I've done everything I can to keep it out. Even a proper sealed window will act like an aquarium and hold water out. I smile because I did an assessment this morning, and the questions that you're asking is what was happening to a homeowner. They have an undergrade garage, and they're in a hill. So the good thing is that everything slopes to the street, so it's not a reverse driveway. But one of her concerns was, there's moisture in my garage, a little mildew smelling. We did outside around the garage. Well, that wall is completely piled with earth in stone planters that are all around, and the downwater spout runs the water against the wall. So we got inside, we took out our little meter, and we started going around that basement wall and noticed the points of entry, and then put it on the cracks, and the cracks have got moisture in it. And all of a sudden, you could see the light coming on. Oh, so that's why you said I should do this outside. The answer is yes. That's why you should be doing these things outside. Direct the water away, lower those flower beds, make sure that you're grading it away from the house, that you're directing the water away. I know you sit on sand, but when you put that much water down beside it, and then it resulted in freeze-thaw, it was a cinder block foundation, there are cracks in the walls. We've shown them the resources that they can go to, and that could be major. It could be some minor things to help them along the way, but definitely those are some of the things that impact it. You need to talk to some professionals. And along with that, if you're going to be doing anything major, you need to talk with city officials that are responsible for the changes that you might want to make, especially when we're talking about grades and redirecting water. So the first thing I would always tell a homeowner is you want to direct the water away from the building. In some of the areas that we're now looking in Toronto, with the side yards being so tight, the limiting lot line is really close. Anything that you're going to do impacts your neighbor. So this now not only involves you and the city and a professional, it involves you, the city professional, and your neighbor. These are some things you should consider. Really talk to professionals. If you're getting a constant seepage and infiltration, you do have some issues, and there's some things you can do minor. Making sure that your cracks are sealed would be the first thing that I would recommend, that if there are any visible cracks, that you make sure that you seal them. But it could be major. You could be talking about putting in foundation drains. You could be talking about putting in membranes on your walls. That involves excavation, and that can get very expensive, but so is replacing a finished basement. It's also very expensive. And seepage, the good news about seepage is it isn't as fast and active as an overland flood would be, where the water would come in a lot quicker. Once you identify it, you really should start to rectify it before it gets worse. We talked about our office. We've experienced a flood in it. We're now putting in long life batteries and solar power to maintain that power to run those pumps. For a lot of other reasons we're putting it in, but primarily those pumps cannot be without power for a long time. The backup batteries do not have enough life, depending on the situation, to start those pumps up and keep them running. We have alarm systems on those pumps. They're set into our security system, and they alert us for that. So yeah, we've experienced it. We've dealt with water, with 3 inches of water in our office, not knowing that our pumps had failed, and at that time we didn't know that the pumps weren't working. That's when we had our security company put in all of the detectors. We have them now on our foundations and floors and in our sump pits to alarm us and alert us, so that we can be proactive if something is failing and we can bring in some other equipment to deal with it. So yes, we've experienced it. Fortunately for us, the damages weren't severe enough. We had a lot of material were flood resistant, water resistant. The floor was ceramics finished and had ceramic floor base, so we were able to withstand a certain amount of water. But I would say for the average homeowner, that would be devastating to have that much water in their basement. Absolutely. We have spring thaw is the one that gets us nervous. We do have that rubble foundation. They're very difficult to seal. We do have we have a weak spot in one location which has its own alarm sitting on it, and we have a suction system that we turn on if that area it starts to develop moisture or water. So yeah, every time when the spring comes and we get a spring rain, if it hasn't thawed, or the thaw comes or something happens quickly, or we get faced with a storm like this, we had one this week, with a lot of water, yeah, we get a little nervous. Everything is standing up, and we're still looking at how we can alleviate some of the damage without having to try to take a whole rubble wall down and hold a building up. Yeah. But definitely, we're cautious, and we're in the industry, and we're nervous. I mean, I guess when you have a lot of information, you're very informed. You know to worry, whereas if you're not informed about it and you've never experienced it, you don't even think about it. No, fortunately I haven't, and neither not personally in my home, and we haven't had it in our office that it would be a major flood. So from our perspective, and people that I do know, they've experienced it in 2016. We have a cottage at Lake McCullough. Lake McCullough is on the Saugeen River system, and there was a tremendous amount of rain and a very fast thaw, which raised the levels of the water in the rivers, and then the river runs through the lake, and the levels were raised tremendously. We're elevated. We did that precaution when we built our addition on our cottage, but some of the property owners there experienced a foot of water on their main floor. So, these are neighbors, and they just had the 40-yard bins, and the emotional impact. Money can replace things. Some things can't be replaced because they're priceless, or they're things that were handed down from your parents or your grandparents. But usually money will repair the damages. But the impact that you have mentally, or that is really, really difficult. I think that's really hard to overcome, the loss. It's an invasion of your space, and this is a loss, and you can really see that. We were involved with a person who did a piece for The Current, and Carol suffered 2 storms in 2014 with the flooding of her brand new house. And she had some very precious artwork, very dear to her. She had her parents living on the main floor, and her daughter lived in the suite below. And she lost a lot of that art. And 3 years later, in an interview, the emotions started to come out. So it's, she was able to replace buildings and things like that, but what she lost and the invasion and how it took things away from her was a big impact, and that never goes away, I guess, because it certainly welled up in her. They should listen. They should listen to the homeowner. What they need to do is ask engaging questions. It's so easy for people that are professionals in the area to go about and tell people what they should do. And it's much better to start asking questions and see where the level of understanding is by the homeowner, what they understand about what is infiltration. Has it ever occurred to them? It could be occurring in a very minor way and they're not aware of it. But if we're talking specifically about infiltration, then it's helping to make them aware but also talk to them, engage them in the conversation rather than just preach to them and tell them, here's what you should be doing. I deal like that with all of them. And again, today, this was a place where in the beginning, as we started, we're on top of a hill, we're sitting on sand, we're 10 feet above the street. We are in an area where we won't have any problems. We found some situations that should be considered. And as we talked and got her engaged in the conversation, her awareness, because she was open and she said, I guess there's some things we really need to do. And I really want to see that report. So I think engaging, don't think that we have all the answers. Sometimes I learn things from the client, the homeowner. So, engage them in the conversation, listen, and then respond to either their questions or, and you got to listen to get their questions.